Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, if you're watching this, it may be because you're trying to break into the sales industry and you have no idea where to start, you may not have any connections, and you're just trying to figure out where to go from here. Today, I think this video is going to help you out because I'm going to sit down with Tristan, who started his first BDR role at Achievers and is now an account executive at a startup called FuseAI, which is Y Combinator backed. And so, with his impressive experience, we're going to walk through some questions that people typically have when trying to break into this industry, and I think it's going to be super helpful. So, without further ado, we'll get straight into the video and talk to Tristan. Okay, so Tristan, for those that don't know you yet, do you mind starting off with an introduction about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name's Tristan Zarifa. Right now, I am currently in the software sales world. Didn't really know kind of what I wanted to do until my last semester of university. Thought I wanted to go to law school. Had a bit of a realization that I wanted to get into sales. Um, Started out in HR tech. Learned how to cold call there. That one was all outbound. So just trying to figure out, okay, how do we reach out to cold people? From there, I ended up moving to Salesforce, where I was doing inbound. So I was calling a bunch of inbound leads and trying to book appointments for account executives. Um, Throughout that whole kind of time period, I also had a side hustle, which was like a fitness coaching business. I decided to take that full time, and that ended up failing, but learned a ton of cool lessons about sales, about entrepreneurship, just personal development as a whole. And then ended up going back into business development at Relay. It was a fintech company. They're like an online business bank for the US. And there's a bit of inbound and outbound. So it was like trying to figure out, okay, how do we cold call these like business owners who are kind of like Main Street America, think like HVAC, plumbers, people who own laundromats, um, as well as like how do we take people who have already signed up and get them fully integrated into the platform. And now today I'm selling for a company called Fuse AI. All my different sales jobs that I've had, I've been exposed to a bunch of different sales technologies. And a big thing I had noticed is that with each company I was at, they had like a bunch of different companies for their whole kind of workflow for outbound sales. So, you'd have one tool to like find leads, another one to get their contact data, another one to send emails, another one to automate LinkedIn. The tool that I'm currently selling, it just does that end to end. So it's kind of just like an all-in-one platform. So as soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, definitely think this can help people. Got to get it into some more people's hands. But yeah, just trying to figure it out, fail forward. Happy to help you guys out as best as I can.
Awesome, thanks. And it's probably interesting too because you had all those previous experiences in business development and now you're applying all that at Fuse AI, which is cool to see as well, I'm sure.
Totally. I remember talking to someone and they said you can only, I think this might be a Steve Jobs quote. They're like, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. So true. So many little moments
Right.
where it's like, it's almost like Slumdog Millionaire, where like you feel like, oh, like this isn't gonna matter. This doesn't mean a lot. And you look back like a few months down the line, and you're like, wow, like I wouldn't have been able to do this if I didn't know this type of a thing.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And kind of like starting out just in the beginning too, what experiences do you think shaped your path into starting out in business development?
For sure. So I actually had a professor who is a Y Combinator founder. He had sold his business and he was teaching sales as well as like entrepreneurship in business school. And I found it really interesting because I was like, okay, going in, I thought sales was like, your typical greasy, like snake oil salesman, basically making money at the expense of others. But what I realized is it's actually making money at the service of other people. So you have to do something helpful for them. If you like meeting people, if you like helping people solve problems, helping them feel empowered, like sales can totally be a rewarding path. So I think from that class onward, I was like, okay, I think I want to get into this path. Definitely think this suits my like temperament kind of personality.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think you kind of mentioned this too right now. Like, I think people who don't really know about the sales industry itself, like they kind of go in with this assumption of what it really looks like. And so for someone watching right now who's never heard the term business development representative, what does that mean? And like, what does the day-to-day job involve?
For sure. So I would say, so there's kind of like two or three different roles in the software sales world. So typically you have like they're either called SDRs or BDRs. What they're doing is they're either cold calling completely cold people, so people who've never heard of your company, and trying to see if they have a problem that your company solves. If they do, they end up setting an appointment for an account executive, or sometimes they call them closers. Um, so yeah, you have like business development rep or sales development rep, also called setter. So that's either outbound or inbound. If people click on a Facebook ad or a LinkedIn ad, or if people even just say, "Hey, like I like what your company's doing. Like, can I see your product?" That would be inbound. So you would just be following up with them, and then either booking it with an account executive, or if you're a full cycle account executive, you would just be setting the meeting for yourself.
Got it. Awesome. And just in terms of like getting into a BDR role or SDR role, like you mentioned, do you think, I know with your experience, you went to Western Ivy, and do you think part of you getting into this role was accredited to your education, or do you think more of that came through your hands-on experience? Just curious to kind of hear what your take on that would be.
Yeah, for sure. I would say it's a little bit different than like finance or consulting, in the sense that like it really doesn't matter where you go to school. Like at the end of the day, there's a sales leaderboard, and you can see who's booking the most amount of qualified meetings, who's sourcing the most amount of revenue, and like the numbers don't lie. So I'd say like if I didn't take that sales class, I wouldn't have been exposed to the like software sales world. But once I was actually in it, like there's people who like I sold actually with someone who was like 19, and he's making like 30K a month at one point. So it really doesn't matter where you go to school. It comes down to like persistence, your ability to tolerate frustration and learn new skills, and then just really hustle and hunger and
Yeah.
hustle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that's and like I want to ask this question too, because I think when I was starting out my career too, like I think I thought, for example, the school mattered so much or whatever it was, but I really think it's you who has to take it all the way. Like you said, it could introduce you to something, but really at the end of the day, it's experiences that come into play. And it's interesting to hear it's consistent with your career as well.
totally.
And I first just want to take us back also to what your first role was, and I know that was at Achievers. And so curious to hear what a typical day looked like there and how it worked once you had your book of business for those watching and interested to kind of start their first job as well in BDR.
Sure. So when I was at Achievers, we were selling HR technology. So the main value add of Achievers is it's almost like an internal social media platform where you recognize a colleague, and you recognize them for one of the company values. So if one of them is like honesty or like trust, you could say, "Hey, Asha, I'm shouting you out for the value of trust." And basically, what it does is it creates more of a feeling of belonging in a company, and it basically helps people stay at companies and be more happy and productive. So that way companies aren't having to pay recruiting firms to like hire new people, or like, get a pay for someone on their own people team to go and source a new candidate.
Got it.
So that's kind of like the value add. Day to day. So how did it work? I'm just trying to think. So we got assigned accounts. I think I had at one point like 100 accounts. Like, accounts are just another name for companies.
Okay.
And Achievers was selling mid-market. So in the software sales world, you have like SMB, which is like typically like small businesses. So think like Main Street businesses, like HVAC, plumbing, heating, cooling. You have like startups. That's like the software term for like, you know, seed, pre-seed, which just means they haven't raised a lot of money, or it could be bootstrapped. It's the founder putting their own money in. Then next up, you have mid-market, which is like, I would say maybe like 50 employees and up. I would say mid-market. Depends. There's a couple different ways you could define it, but that's like between like a huge enterprise like Coca-Cola, and like a startup. So we were selling to mid-market and up. So with these 100 mid-market accounts that I had, basically I had to figure out, okay, who makes decisions in these accounts? So typically it'd be the chief people officer or the chief human resource officer. And then I had to figure out, okay, do these people have the problem that we solved? Like, do they have people leaving and a lot of attrition? And I had to do that through cold calls. So they have what's called like a power line. So it's basically like anyone who's like director or VP and above, they're going to care more about the metrics that impact the profitability of the company and the valuation of the company. But then when you're talking with like managers or individual contributors, you have to put yourself in their shoes. So like imagine you're someone doing benefits, like you're filling out benefits for your company. If it's really frustrating when you have to keep filling out a ton of forms because people keep leaving, for example, You could ask them that on a phone call, but they're not going to care about the company valuation the same way like an executive or a VP would. Conversely, the VP wouldn't care about like the day-to-day frustration of like, oh, the payroll software is frustrating. So it's just kind of understanding what each person cares about, and then how you can see if they have a problem, and if they do, then connecting them with someone on your team.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of like you have to wear their different hats to really understand how you're going to talk to them and how you're going to kind of create that connection with the person you're talking to.
Mhm.
So that's interesting. Like that I think that also comes with experience, I'm assuming too, and like as you
Totally.
continue doing it.
Totally. And I would say like half the battle is like just staying in the game long enough to pick up a lot of little nuances. Like we had at Achievers, we had this thing called the Achievers Workforce Institute, and we were publishing like these white papers as like an industry leader of like this is what the best practice looks like for retaining your top talent, retaining your employees. So I would try to circle some of the different insights on those white papers and try to memorize key stats like, hey, we actually drove XYZ result for Ford or McDonald's. Because when you're on a cold call,
Oh.
you have to think pretty quick.
Right.
But yeah, with time, you start to get more of the details.
Right, right. That's a good tip. And my next question was just, what do you think helped you stand out in that interview process, without necessarily having that direct initial experience? Because I'm sure that's something people watching may be struggling with as they're trying to get into this industry.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say sales is very interesting in the sense that like there's a lot of a turnover, but there's also a lot of opportunities, and people are always hiring for BDRs and account executives. So I would say I actually talked to someone in the career counseling department at Ivey, and he gave me great advice. He said basically you want to demonstrate the skill of prospecting or like trying to reach out to people when you try to get the job. So he's like, hey, go online, sign up for like a free trial of like a lead enrichment tool. Basically just gets you someone's like phone number and email. So what I would do is I would send them a LinkedIn message. I would basically look at the company that I wanted to apply for, try to reach out to like five to like eight or nine people. Of those, it's basically like a sales funnel because like of those, maybe five will accept your connection request, maybe two will meet with you. Um, and then from there, you basically just want to understand what the company is about. They'll give you different tips for interviewing. And then also I would send emails. So like say on Monday, I'd send an email. Maybe Tuesday would be like a LinkedIn connection request. Wednesday would be like a LinkedIn message. I don't know. Thursday would be like a follow up in that same thread for the email. So by doing that, you're demonstrating the skills that you're going to use to bring in new business with like cold prospects. So
Right.
I'd say that definitely helped.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point actually, because that is kind of transferable when you say that. Like I didn't think of that off the top of my head. So no, that's a very interesting process. And I think people who are watching, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have all of this experience in sales. You just need to have that eagerness to want to do it.
Totally. Sales is a very learnable skill. Like anyone can learn it. It's just a set amount of repetitions and a set amount of what's it called? Like pattern recognition. I would
Right.
say the character traits are really what separate salespeople who are like really, really at the top of their game from like just everyone else, I would say.
Got it. And yeah, like even mentioning that too, what does success really look like in those first 3 to 6 months when somebody's in that BDR role?
Good question. I would say so when I first started, like my palms were sweaty because I was like, oh my God, like I'm gonna cold call. I've never done this. I remember sitting with my manager and I was like, what do I say when they pick up?
Yeah.
Manager was like, say hello. I'm like, what do I say after that? Like I
Yeah.
don't know, I don't
Which
know
is
what I'm
valid when
doing,
you're
man. Like
starting
I'm
out.
just
Yeah.
thrown in the deep end. So I would say just getting it's almost like exposure therapy, like 30 neutral exposures, and like you'll be numb to it. So I'd say getting those reps as fast as you can, and then looking at like all the anatomy of a cold call from like, okay, the opener. How do you get people to give you 30 seconds to share why you're calling? So like nailing that first part. Because you can't figure out if they have a problem and then pitch them on meeting with you unless like they give you time to share why you're calling.
Right.
So I'd say understanding that, mastering the opener, which is just like listening to yourself on like a audio recording, getting feedback, listening to other successful reps, cold calls, and just trying to identify common patterns. I would say that, and then just getting familiar with like what influences people. Like how do people make decisions? And once you understand that, you can start to use some of those principles more. But I'd say, yeah, just feeling forward, getting a ton of volume and a ton of reps in.
Got it. And I'm assuming with those reps and volume you're getting in, you likely will hear a few no's before you hear those yeses. And so how do you handle that rejection when you're doing this type of role in sales, and how do you continue to stay motivated during it?
Good question. I would say it varies based on like the role that you're in. So like if you're selling to small businesses, it's typically a lot more high volume in the sense that like the sales cycle might only be one or two calls before you close someone versus like if you're booking meetings for like enterprise deals, or if you're selling an enterprise deal, some of those take like a year or more. So I think like that there's a bit of nuance there, but like assuming you're cold calling as a BDR, SDR, I would say setting an income goal and like understanding, okay, like what do I want to use this income for, whether it's investing, taking a vacation, paying off student debt, like whatever that goal is. And then just knowing like, okay, there's a finite amount of no's I need to hear to get the yeses that will help me to hit my income goal and help this person like solve their business problem.
Right.
So I think when you frame it that way, it's like, okay, am I willing to like sit through 50,000 no's to hit my income goal? And when you frame it like that, it's like, okay, well, there's an end to it. So, like, okay, every no brings you one step closer to a yes. So I say that's huge. Um, and then also one thing that I learned from Brian Tracy, which was helpful. I learned this like last year. I wish I knew it when I started. Um, you should count the amount of no's you get actually. Try to hit a certain amount of no's because like statistically, for every like, I don't know, 20 to 50 no's or whatever that number is, you're gonna get a yes. So always go for the no. Because a lot of salespeople, they kind of shoot themselves in their foot because they don't ask. But if you make the metric like just asking for it and getting rejected, you're gonna get a ton of yeses.
So when people are deciding what type of role they want to go into, there are factors like growth and comp. But beyond that, what other factors do you think people should be considering when they're deciding between working for a bootstrap company, private equity, public, or VC-backed? Just kind of curious to hear what you'd think about that.
Yeah, good question. I would say it depends on like kind of what someone's goal is. And like fully just being honest here, like I had no idea what the whole like landscape looked like. I just knew, okay, sales, I like
Right.
this is kind of sounds interesting. Let's figure this out. So I would say for each of those different buckets, you're gonna have different types of like pieces of work, like how quickly you work, how much structure there is, as well as like the training. So like let's say you start with like a Fortune 500 company. They're just going to have a ton of different processes for like, this is how you sell to healthcare. They'll have like a whole playbook of someone who's figured out like, okay, for only like a whole year straight, they've just called into healthcare. So they'll tell you all the objections. They'll tell you all the kind of common patterns. And you'll get really good training on that. They have excellent training too in big companies for like best practices. So like let's say you cold call someone, how do you pull the deal cycle forward? So how do you, instead of having a deal close in like 2 months, how do you get it closed in like 6 weeks? They'll give you tips like, hey, book the discovery call for like the same day or the next day, as opposed to a week out. So they'll give you that training, which is good. I'd say one challenge of working for a bigger company is like there's gonna be like constant, what's it called? Like you have to understand that like the Wall Street investors are constantly looking at these public companies and metrics, and there's going to be pushes to like hit certain like projections. So just having that in mind of like, okay, hey, like maybe there's a month left. If you're an AE, for instance, maybe you can discount like a certain amount but then the buyer would know that. They would know, hey, it's this person's quarter end, so you'd have less negotiating leverage. So just being aware that like those factors are at play and like
Right.
the CEOs still they have to care about the stock price. Like even if there's like a world event or something that happens, so kind of just having that in your mind. Next up would be I would say a private equity owned company. So they're probably not going to be under as much pressure of like a public company. So there's less of that to worry about. I would say it's probably a lot more like a sustainable pace of work. For instance, like when I was at Achieve in that pace for a long time. Um, and the growth,
Sorry, you cut
yeah.
out there.
Oh, sorry, let me try that
Yes.
again.
Yes, I think, yeah.
Um, I would say, yeah, so for a private equity backed company, typically they're not looking to grow as quick as like a venture capital company, or like they're not they're not under as much pressure of like a public company of like hitting certain projections that are public and influence the stock price. So it's more sustainable, the pace of work. I would say. I'm trying to think what else. There's trade-offs like in each kind of type. So the next up would be like a bootstrapped founder. So like let's say you're working for someone who they took their life savings, they put it into this software. Maybe they're coding it themselves at night and like trying to sell it during the day. You're gonna learn a lot from that person because you're gonna be kind of like one of their right-hand people, especially if it's a smaller startup.
Mhm.
I would say in that scenario, like you're gonna learn a lot, but it's also on you to like bridge the gaps because there's not gonna be as much training just because it's like a newer company. Um, I'd say anything under like 10 million bootstrapped, it's going to be a huge learning curve, especially if you're getting started. I know what a lot of people do is like they'll go to like a big company, learn a lot of skills, and then as they feel more and more confident in their skills, they can go to smaller companies or like more companies where the onus is on you to kind of produce the results. And then I would say the last one would be venture-backed firms. Now with VC, I think one thing that people should understand going in is like the limited partners and the venture capitalists who are putting their money into these funds, it's basically like they have 100 bets they're making, and like two of them will be absolute unicorns like Facebook or Airbnb, and they will make up for a lot of the losses of like some of the other companies or some of them that only returned like double the money or triple relative to like 1,000x. So I think just understanding that like um some of those dynamics going in, like the pressure to grow is going to be much, much higher than a public company, a bootstrap company, or PE backed. Um, but it's good because it does force you to grow a lot, and like the playbooks that got you from like 1 million to 10 are going to be very different than that get you to 10 from 10 to 50 and then from 50 to 100 million. So I'd say yeah, it just depends on like what you're looking for. When in doubt, I'd say go for a bigger company, learn the skills, and then yeah, you can always jump into like a startup or like a scale up company.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really helpful for people that are looking into it because I think if it were me and I was going in blind, I wouldn't have thought of all of the different options like you had just mentioned. So I think that's very helpful. And in terms of a VC-backed company and like the pressures of that, I'm sure now that's relatable to you as well because now I know that you're a founding account executive at FuseAI and it's a YC-backed startup. And so my question to you is just what drew you to take that leap and what does building a sales motion from scratch look like at a startup now?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say what drew me to take the leap is that I had experienced the problem that they were solving firsthand. So I felt like I had a lot of conviction in my ability to like basically tell stories and influence other people. Like, listen, I actually lived this problem, and this is why I left that company to come and like to change the outcomes for other sales teams and for other salespeople. I would say that's the first thing. I would say though, I wouldn't have been ready if it was like any part earlier since I started in sales because like in the beginning it was like okay just learning how to cold call then it was like okay how are sales motions built I got to see that really up close at Relay like how do you build a sales team how do you build processes what does it look like in the software world how does the revenue operations like the people who manage the systems and technologies for the sales team how does that relationship work with the salespeople um, how do you write copy? How do you persuade people over email? Because when you're selling, a lot of people will do what's called like a multi-channel sequence. So like I might send you a LinkedIn message. I also might cold call you and leave you a voicemail, and then I might leave a personalized email where I'm trying to persuade you over email to meet with me. So I think trying to learn all those skills at once can be a lot, especially when you have the pressure of like quota. But like as time goes on, and you keep chipping away at them. It then makes it less risky to go somewhere where you're required to have them, I would say.
Awesome. Got it. And now that you're in this AE role, what does a typical day actually look like compared to when you were doing a BDR role?
I would say it's similar in the sense that like you still have to prospect. So when I say prospect, I mean like you basically have to find deals. So it's I like to think about it, it's like two modes. You're either in like hunt mode where you're trying to find new like people to sell to, or you're in like kill mode in the sense that like you want to close a deal. Obviously, if it's a fit and it helps a person.
Right.
Um, so I would say yeah, kind of understanding it like that. I would say it's a little bit different than working at as an account executive at a different company, like a bigger company, in the sense that like I'm trying to I'm trying to think, okay, how can we grow the company as fast as possible? Now that could come from other ways like, how do we run the best ads? Or like how do we create the best referral partnerships with like other lead gen agencies, or how do we break into masterminds that have our audience? They might not be our space, but they might be adjacent. So for instance, like if someone if someone if someone really likes joining a mastermind for like entrepreneurship and it's for marketers, well, one factor that influences the valuation of someone's company is like how many ways they can get customers because it de-risks the ability to keep making money. Like for instance, if you have 9 ways you can get customers, like through ads, through cold calls, through emails, your company will be priced higher. So if those marketers are all in this mastermind, and the topic of the mastermind is how do you build an outbound sales team, even though they're not necessarily like in the software world, I know they're still focused on that topic, which is what we help them with. So it's just trying to understand like where's our audience, how do we get them, and how do we get the highest return on our time? So I'd say it's a mix of things like cold calling, writing email copy, trying to look at like what's resonating, as well as trying to figure out like what worked and then why. And then trying to do a little bit more of that and look at the top 10%, figure out what worked there, and just keep doing the wandering until you end up figuring out what works.
Got it. It's interesting too, because like as you're talking to, it sounds like from where you first started, it's like, okay, how do I even say hello? Like, what do I say next after hello? And now it's like kind of using all those pieces you've already learned, and it's kind of on blast where you're looking at it from all these different perspectives and kind of using all that BDR experience to now use that in this AE role and kind of close those deals and go into the kill mode, like you mentioned.
Totally. And like another thing too, like it scales all the way up, right? So like right now, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do we close what are called POCs or like proof of concepts? How do we get bigger companies to like take a gamble and say, hey, we'll try this out for like 2 months, see how it compares to our current software, and then look into like rolling it out across the company. So there's like always a new skill that you can learn to get more leverage on your time,
Right.
which is what keeps it fun. It keeps it fun, but it's also
Right.
humbling.
Right. I bet. And in terms of the AE role itself, what do you think has been the hardest part of the transition, and what surprised you the most when you kind of switched into the AE role?
Yeah, I would say the hardest part of the transition is understanding, especially at a startup, understanding, okay, what is the sales motion going to look like for each type of company? So, for instance, if I'm selling to a startup and I'm selling to the founder, it probably would be like a 1 or 2 call close in the sense that, like, maybe call one, I understand their pain, like, we get them a free trial, and then on call two, they sign up. Versus if we're selling into like a mid-market company where they have like, say, 10 sales reps, the first call is going to be like understanding their problem and then meeting with the person who manages the systems, then having them test it with like a third of their sales team, and then addressing any issues or concerns that come up with them, and then making a business case to like the CFO to roll it out company wide. So it's just understanding, okay, who has influence in each of these companies and what does that sales motion look like for each one? So that's definitely keeping me on my toes, trying to figure it out.
I bet it sounds like it too. Got
Yeah.
it. And for BDR right now, who wants to become an AE watching this, what do you think they should be doing right now to position themselves for making that jump?
I would say um never letting your cold calling skills get rusty because at the end of the day, like your ability to set appointments for yourself will influence your own income. Kind of just going back to that goal, like if you have a goal, hey, I want to save up for a car or buy a house or like whatever it is, just knowing that like if I consistently set aside like an hour a day to find new people, one, I'm gonna have a higher packed pipeline, which basically means I'm gonna have more deals to choose from, so I'm not so dependent on 1 or 2 closing, which will give you more leverage when you negotiate. Because if you don't need a deal to close, you can have like 5 other options. You're kind of selling from your back foot, which can help you to hold higher prices. And then the second thing I would say is like having that same white belt mentality of like, okay, I'm gonna suck at this. Given the experience and skill that I have right now, like, would it be reasonable for me to be excellent? No, like I'm
Right.
just starting. So, but if I keep going over time and I keep learning from people who have done it, like over time, it would be unreasonable for me not to get it, like with enough persistence. So
Right.
yeah, same mindset, new level, new devil type of thing. Yeah.
Right. Got it. And just general advice too now for people who are watching. For somebody, if you were starting over with zero experience and zero connections, what would the first 90 days look like for somebody who's in the similar position?
Okay. You're saying like to break into like a BDR role?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I would say day one, I would figure out like what companies I want to work for. So if I'm brand new, I'd probably try to get into bigger companies to learn some of the best practices of sales. Um, so I would say signing up for some kind of email enrichment tool. Like I think I used Lucia. Little plug, FuseAI, you can get a free trial. But yeah, you can also enrich people's phones and emails on there. From there, then what I would do is I would figure out like, okay, who are the salespeople that I want to talk to? And I would basically try to connect on LinkedIn, see if I could cold call them or even just like send them an email, and then try to show up prepared to a call and just ask people, hey, what has your experience been like? What does success look like? What would the first 90 days look like as someone who's successful? And then see if you can get a referral from one of the salespeople because the HR and people teams, they actually give bonuses because it's cheaper to pay out an existing employee maybe like a couple $1,000s to find a good salesperson as opposed to hiring an external firm and paying them like 10, 20, 30K. So I would do that. I would read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini. I would be patient with that one. That was the first book that I read about like sales and persuasion. Took me like 4 or 5 months because it's a thick book, but that is by far the most important book for learning how to sell anything, any idea, anything to anyone. Because it teaches you, okay, there's 6 or 7 ways that people make decisions. So like if they see social proof, if they see other people doing it, then they're more likely to say yes. If they've already made a prior commitment to a certain identity or a certain pattern of behavior, they're more likely to say yes if you reinforce that existing commitment. So it shows you all of those different traits so that when you're on the phone in your BDR role, you understand like, hey, if this is some like pushback or resistance that I'm getting, let me just throw out this case study and say, hey, this is how everyone else in the industry is doing it. And then you would know, okay, they're going to be more likely to say yes because that's social proof. Yeah.
Awesome, interesting. It sounds like that's cool because there's also kind of the psychology behind sales where you're really trying to understand how people act and the way that their behaviors are as well. And I know you kind of just mentioned a book as well, but one of my questions was also if there are any books that you recommend for people trying to navigate the software sales world and just like how to sell. So just curious if there's any other ones too that you think are staples.
Totally. Okay. So I would say the first one would be Influenced by Robert Cialdini or Cialdini. I'm not sure how to say it. Second one would be it's called Cold Calling Sucks. It's by Nick Sigelski and Armand Farouk. They run 30 Minutes to President's Club. It's like a sales media, sales training company. Those guys are great. Another one, if you're trying to understand like startups and how to build sales motions in the sense of like different ways to get customers that will give you the highest valuation on a company. It's called Software as a Science by Dan Martell. He's excellent. He runs a whole mastermind at coaching business, coaching software CEOs how to grow their companies. The last one I would say, similar kind of vein, it's called the Sales Acceleration Formula. It's by Mark Roberge. And basically, he was the first salesperson at HubSpot, and he actually had an engineering background. So he came to it from a completely different standpoint. And he's like, how do I systematize this based on data and math to create the highest likelihood of getting our company from like 0 to 100 million? And it teaches you how to use data to think through like scaling a sales team. I'd say those four are really, really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's a good point too, where, with sales, it's not necessarily like you're reinventing the process. There's so many resources to leverage to succeed in this role, it seems like. And those sound like awesome books as well, for people to look into. And just the last question is if there's one thing you wish you'd known before starting in tech sales that would be helpful for people watching today.
Understanding like how to manage your own state and your own belief systems is huge in the sense that all of these skills are learnable if you believe you can learn them. So Elon Musk has a quote where he says, basically, unless it breaks the laws of physics, it's possible. But that only applies if someone believes that anything short of the laws of physics is possible. So even if it is possible, but they don't believe that they could learn how to cold call, they're subconscious mind won't let them take the actions necessary to learn the skill because they don't believe it.
Right.
Conversely, if they believe it, but if they have like a negative state, if they're like basically like this hunched over and like all afraid, their physiology is influencing their nervous system and it's shaping their beliefs and their state of confidence and certainty. Like imagine trying to sell someone, it's a good product, I think it'll help you versus like, listen, if you give me
Right.
30 seconds, I'm telling you we're gonna change your company. We're gonna make your life so much easier. You can even just see the difference in my tone of voice. So I'd say understanding state and understanding beliefs. If you can just believe if someone else has done it, it's possible, then just being able to deal with the frustration that comes and knowing that with enough reps, with enough feedback, you're gonna get it.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you so much for this video and for everybody watching. I think this
Totally.
is going to be super helpful to them. And so yeah, thank you for answering all my questions and thank you to everybody that's watching as well.